Get on the train before it leaves the station. The truth train is coming, gonna run them down, run them down.
Alrighty, hello folks. Hey, we're here talking about episode 4 of Netflix's Confession Killer. So, this is going to be a pretty short one actually, because those of you who don't know, I'm going to be going live with Paul over on his channel here pretty soon. So, I'm going to keep this kind of short and just kind of hit some of the high points of this episode that were the most interesting. Obviously, at the last video I was talking about the emergence of the girl that he was the girlfriend that he had killed originally, right? And that she emerged and she was alive. Well, as it turns out, that was a hoax. Henry had been writing letters to her and had, basically given her enough information to impersonate the girl, and that's what was going on there. It was a hoax. Vic Fazell had been championing it, but ultimately he's the one that sniffed it out. Fortunately, it was him that sniffed it out, and it wasn't sniffed out in the courts. So anyways, that all fizzled out. So it does look like, obviously, that Henry Lee Lucas killed his mother, his girlfriend at that time, it was a 14-year-old girl, and the girl's mother. And those three he definitely killed. I really don't think any of the other ones. I think when he went into court that day, like I said in video 1 or 2, where I mentioned that when he got to court and in front of the judge said, well, what are we going to do about the other 100 people I killed? Yeah, I felt like that was a desperate kind of thing he was doing. It was weird and odd. And anyway, the weird thing here, folks, and I wanted to say this, obviously, before I moved on to the next episode, was in this episode, they're basically, you're seeing these families in the hometown where Jim Boutwell hails from, or where he's the sheriff essentially, and how he had kind of gotten a few of his cases there solved through Henry Lee Lucas, and now things were coming back. Those people were starting to question. Well, first of all, they weren't questioning. First of all, they thought he was the one that did it, and so when George Bush Jr. governor of Texas at the time, granted him a reprieve from his execution and took him off of death row, a lot of people got upset about that. It just so happened that it was right at the time when George Bush was getting ready to run for president, and so he didn't want this big, media storm with these families who were upset about the fact that Henry Lee Lucas wasn't going to be put to death. And so he called one of the, they show one of the members of one of the families saying that he actually, called or whatever, wrote, got in contact with them and said, look, what can I do for you to make this better for you, basically. So that, he was trying to offer them something helpful. And they made a very excellent request. They basically said, I want the DNA tested that was found on my sister. I want that DNA tested, and I want to find out if it matches Henry Lee Lucas. You know what I mean? And that was what she asked for. Big thing to ask for. And of course, because George Bush did want to make it he did want to quiet this thing down, and he didn't want it to be a big negative publicity while he was trying to run for president. And so he did. He got a DNA guy, a detective guy, an investigator, who was able to do DNA and all that sort of stuff down there, and he started testing that stuff. And that's where that's all leading to at the end of this episode, where right when it cuts off, they're talking about the DNA. We know who did it now, and it wasn't Henry Lee Lucas. And then the episode just kind of ends. And it's like, and that left me thinking, like, oh my God, are we gonna find out that it was actually Jim Boutwell who killed these 3 people? Because there was something they knew about something. Because it's this old lady, and it's the young kid and the young girl who had gone to see the movie, whose car had run out of gas on the way back home from the movie theater, and actually one of the girl's dad actually saw them walking, didn't realize it was his daughter, and didn't stop, but like saw the 2 kids walking and realized the next day that he must have seen his own daughter and her boyfriend at the time or whatever walking. But turns out they both ended up turning up dead. and so that got pinned on Lucas. So there's these 3 deaths there that are interesting, but they basically, what they're alluding to here at the end of 4 is that they now know who did it. It wasn't Henry Lee Lucas, and that just left me wondering, like, oh boy, how twisted is this gonna get? You know what I mean? Like, how twisted is this gonna get? That's kind of what I was, anyway. So yeah, interesting. And it's like, it's interesting here to watch the victims' families. You know what I mean? Watching the victims' families turn on the sheriff, on Jim Boutwell. Because they had obviously accepted everything he said. They thought he was their biggest, protector, champion, or whatever, right? They had so much faith in him. But then once they started getting, once all this crazy stuff started to happen, and then they started to look into it, and once these DNA results came back, obviously they lost all faith in him. And it's interesting to watch that turn, the way that happens. I think it's interesting because when you watch before they are all about supporting, Jim Boutwell and the law enforcement, and there's like not a bad word as far as law enforcement and stuff like that go. But and I say that, and that's even up to the point where when the execution was stayed, and they were very upset about that. But then eventually this DNA comes back, and it changes the whole complexion of the situation. So obviously I can't wait to see what happens in episode 5, to find out, number one, who that DNA comes back to, if they in fact did find the person. And it would be very, very strange if it was Jim Boutwell. But the way this thing's been going, I mean that shocking of a turn wouldn't surprise me, because why on earth were they so committed to perpetuating this whole thing, and denying any accounts that Henry Lee Lucas may have been incorrect or was maybe lying? So essentially at this point I'm wondering, I'm like, why were they so invested in not course correcting this? The Texas Rangers, the task force and everything, why were they so disinterested in that? And that must be because Jim Boutwell found it so displeasing that maybe somebody might start looking at the convictions in his jurisdiction, that he was unwilling to accept any questioning of Henry Lee Lucas and his confessions, right? Which made me think, well, how personally invested is he? And that's why I was saying earlier, I was suggesting that maybe he had a hand in killing those 3 people, that maybe they saw something they shouldn't have seen, that maybe he was into some kind of activity he shouldn't have been into. I don't know. That's the kind of shocking kind of reveal I'm, anticipating possibly. But I am eager to find out, who it is that did commit those crimes there, because they are teasing it. By ending episode 4 the way they did, they were teasing it pretty hard. Now, after the way they ended episode 3 with a charlatan on camera, well, I'll take it with a grain of salt. We'll see what happens in episode 5. So, okay, those of you who are interested, go over to Paul Capaldi's channel and check us out over there. I'm going to try and upload this right now real quick before him and I go. So hopefully you guys will be able to check this out. And then we'll be live over on his channel, so go over and check that out. I'll even leave a link for his channel down below for you guys to be able to find it, for those of you who don't know how. And that's about it. If you haven't already, please hit subscribe. We'll see you.